Does it claim to be myth, fiction, or opinion? So, for example, let's look at the Gospels. Do I have a thing here? Let's look at the Gospels. Matthew, what kind of witness? Eyewitness, primary witness. He's one of the disciples. He makes a claim to be a primary witness. Was he there?
Yes.
Geographically, yes. Was he chronologically there?
Yes.
Yes. Does it claim to be myth? Does it claim to be fiction? Does it claim to be opinion? No. It claims to be what? An eyewitness account of Jesus, right? Mark. And we're going to talk about this in detail, but Mark, primary, secondary, tertiary. Secondary witness. Maybe primary, but it's been attributed secondary because it was supposed to be from Peter to Mark. Secondary witness. Geographically placed? Chronologically placed? Does it claim to be a witness to historical events? Yes. Mark. Matthew, Mark, Luke. Luke. Primary or secondary? Secondary, but possibly primary. In antiquity, we attribute that Luke was one of the 72 guys disciples sent out in Luke, by the way. But secondary witness, we'll accept that, right? Secondary witness, that's pretty good. Geographically placed? Chronologically placed. Does it make a claim to be history? Right in the front it says, just like Herodotus. Luke says, this is a historical account. Period. John, what kind of witness? Primary witness. We can go on. This is a way we evaluate a document for internal points. If you've read the Gospels, don't compare the Gospels between each other at this point. But if you've read the Gospels, do they lack internal contradictions?
No, they have internal
inconsistencies, but not contradictions.
No, not between them. Internally. Are there any internal contradictions in the documents?
Not significant.
I've studied for a long time. I can tell you there are no internal contradictions in the documents. Okay? You can check yourself. Just read it. Are there any internal contradictions? Internal contradictions is, does the sun come up in the wrong space? Is the day... Remember in the apocryphal works? I talked about internal contradictions. Remember? In Tobit, he was supposed to go to Ecubana, and Ecubana, it said it took him a day, and Ecubana is like a month's travel. That's an internal contradiction, all right? It's geographically impossible. When we looked at Judith, it was geographically impossible for them to move as quickly as they did. It was, some of the areas were not known. But every single place in the New Testament is known. It's set in stone, literally. You know what I'm saying, right? So there are no internal contradictions. Many works in antiquity have serious problems. The apocryphal works that I showed you, they have a lot of internal issues. Okay? A lot of other documents in antiquity have serious issues. Many of them are not histories. We talked about that. Remember in the apocryphal class, how they might or might not be histories. The New Testament works display no evident internal contradictions. We look at cohesiveness and comprehensible. Has anyone read the Gospels?
Yeah.
Can you understand what they say, basically?
Yes.
You might not fully understand them, but you can read them. Even in a translation, they make sense. Do they make sense to a degree? Yeah. Now, I didn't bring my example again, but sometimes I bring the example of Gilgamesh or Manos, the Zoroastrian. Sometimes I bring Buddha. Look, has anyone read the Book of the Dead? Buddha, any of the Gitas? Don't bother. Do it for your own thing, but they are incomprehensible. They do not make sense at all internally. They talk about the gods in terms of the gods, things that no human would ever know about the gods. This is a thing that Socrates complained about Greek, pre-rational Greek literature. That, how can you talk about the gods when you don't know anything about the gods? See? And on the other hand, the New Testament documents purport to be what? And what do, by the way, the Old Testament documents purport to be? An eyewitness historical account, or a historical account of what happened. Now, there are things in there that we, maybe a scientist, maybe someone would say, well, I don't buy that. Well, that's okay. Remember what I told you? As a historian, you do have to buy that somebody said they saw this. But I mean, you have to buy it totally. That's all right. I mean, you know, that's questioning, and that happens in human culture all the time. That's why you study to see what it really said. Because sometimes it doesn't say what you think it said, in English, for example. So anyway, the degree of witness. We just talked about that, the geographic and chronological place. We'll look at more detail. And here is the bigger list. The bigger list, in this I have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Josephus, Wars and Antiquities, Tacticus, Centaurus, Suetonius, Pliny, Plutarch, Rhodus, Sophocles, Xenophon. These are all historians. And this gives the lapse. You notice the lapse. Look at the New Testament documents. Here's Pauline documents, Paul's letters, 50 to 65 AD, depending. 52 is the earliest, we think, which is earliest attributed 1 Thessalonians. I've taught a class step before, it's pretty cool stuff. In any case, you can go look at my website. I won't take the time to go all through this, but this just repeats some of the information we have. The internal test, see, am I going backwards? What's it? Compared to other works in antiquity, the New Testament documents fulfill all the internal qualifications at least as well, if not better, than any other work. Period. It's really good. So based on the bibliographical internal test, a work is always historically given the benefit of the doubt. Okay, do you hear this? If a work passes the bibliographical and the internal tests, what do we then need to look for to either agree it or confute it? To agree with it or confute it. What do we look for? A source that has better degree or merit, or equal degree or merit, right? That's what we look for. So that's what it means when we say we give it the benefit of the doubt. In other words, when we find a document in antiquity that meets the bibliographical test well, you know, and meets the internal test well, then we say, cool, this is a historical document. You know, this is a good historical document. We can use this. And then what do we look for? Something to compare it with. So that's what we do. The historical claims of the New Testament documents are assumed to be true until you find what? Something that is of equal degree or merit. Now the problem you have, are you going to find anything of equal degree or merit? You can't. Because remember the chart I showed you? These are the best you got in history. Josephus' Antiquities, about the same period. The lapse of the event to writing is huge, but the lapse of the event to manuscripts is ginormous. I don't have the main manuscripts. I mean, I got 50, which is pretty good, 50 and 75. But you see the problem here? So what are they teaching in the colleges? Josephus. What should they be teaching? The Gospels, at least. Well, how about the New Testament documents? I'm pointing this out, all right? So, based on, okay, we've done this. All historians know this. Let's look at the external test. The external test is where you compare other works from the same region, the same time period. But you've got to have something of equal degree or merit. The problem is, in antiquity, do we have anything of equal degree or merit to the New Testament documents? No, we don't. But that's okay. People have been comparing to other stuff forever. Guess what? They agree. Matter of fact, archaeologically, is there anything archaeologically that confutes or disagrees with the New Testament documents? None. Never found a thing. Right? They said that for years that old Pilate never existed. And then they found already a couple of stones where it says Pontius Pilate on them. You know? My goodness gracious. Isn't that amazing? But even so, Josephus, that guy Josephus, Jewish writer who wrote under the pay of the Romans about Jerusalem, and he wrote about some eyewitness things he saw, but many of the things he wrote about he never saw. He was a tertiary witness to these events. But guess what it's taught? When you teach about that period in antiquity, guess who is the main source? Josephus. Or Maccabees. Remember Maccabees? Which isn't bad. I mean, Maccabees is a pretty good source. But Josephus, why does he have authority? Why does he have better degree or merit than the New Testament documents? He doesn't. But yet, that's what we teach on our college campuses. Or campi, I should say campi. You could compare the works of the New Testament to each other. Because, you know, if you did, you'd find that, you know, and what do you say? Yes, there are. There are some things that look like contradictions. And as a matter of fact, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. There's stuff that are evident contradictions between New Testament documents. Okay? They're evident contradictions. I think that when we get finished with this class, you'll understand why, because they're Greek literature. They're not contradictions in Greek literature. They are contradictions in an English modern understanding of Greek literature. But that's the point. That's why I'm teaching a class in the Gospels as Greek literature. So you understand the difference between an English translation and what does the Greek really say. That's the point. Other histories are not as reliable as the New Testament, but they substantiate events and facts in it. For example, we have external authenticity attested to by Eusebius, Papias, Justin the Martyr, Irenaeus, Polycarp, Josephus, many more. From Suetonius, you know, to contemporaries in both Latin and Greek culture. They talked about the Christus. They talked about the events that were occurring in Jerusalem. You know, many times they were side events because they weren't as important to them as the next war that Rome was going into. Right? In history, the things that get written down are the things that are the most important, not the common. Not the things that are niche in the wall type stuff. In any case, this is a quote from Josephus. You can go look on my account. It's interesting that there are other Jewish accounts that are semi-contemporary. They're Talmudic accounts. They not only acknowledge the existence and birth of Christ, but actually attempt to discount the deity of Jesus. For example, there is a wonderful Talmudic account about how Mary's lover was a Roman soldier named Pandus, and that Pandus basically was the father of Jesus. He raped Mary, and that's how it occurred. Now, what does that acknowledge in history already? That Jesus exists, that
Mary is his mother.
Mary is his mother, that his father was unknown, and there was a controversy about it. I mean, if you're looking at that as a proof text against the fact that Jesus existed or against the New Testament documents, you're fooling yourself. It's a proof text that what they say, at least somebody was out there trying to discredit it in, you know, the 2nd century already. So, you know, it's amazing that I get all these people tell me, well, you know, there's nothing that attests to, for example, Jesus. Well, you got Suetonius in about 60 BC or AD, 60 AD talking about it. You got other documents in Greek and Greek and Roman texts talking about these events, and yet many of them are disparaging them. That's okay. It's a great proof text. I'm just a historian. I don't try to make judgments. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't try to make judgments about one that's more accurate than the other. I just make a judgment on the degree of merit. You see? So as a historian, where do you think I have to, if I'm a good historian, what do I have to go to? The work with the best degree of merit, right? If I don't, I'm an idiot. Right? So the other works, I can take them in advisement and show how they prove the context of what I'm talking about. That's the point. Archaeological evidence, nothing alters our knowledge, etc., etc. External comparisons of the work generally don't show disagreement, but there are things that apparently are at odds in a number of places. They all, like for example, Luke and Matthew, both passed the bibliographical internal external tests. Luke would be considered less reliable, right? So we'd agree with Matthew first because of the merit and degree. On the genealogy of Christ, the Sermon on the Mount versus the Plain, based on the test, they should be considered irrefutable, right? But we find differences. And I'm not going to go into the differences in this class. What I'll do is, in the succeeding classes, we'll talk about the documents specifically. We can't get into huge detail, but we'll talk about it. And you can go look at my website. And I don't have time to talk about television school or the Q, which is an interesting, never found, but in any case. The conclusion. Based on a legal historical test, we can conclude that the written words of all the books in the New Testament are historical fact, and in most cases, primary source of historical fact. There's no reason for us to doubt the historical accuracy, veracity, or authority in history. No belief is required to accept the historical accuracy, veracity, or authority.